Uncle's Otto's Truck by Stephen King. It's a rare relief to write this down. I haven't slept well since I found my Uncle Otto dead, and there have been times when I have really wondered if I have gone insane or if I will. In any way, it would have been more merciful if I did not have the actual object here in my study. If I hadn't taken away from his little one-room house, I could begin persuading myself it was all only an hallucination, a fragment, or an overworked and overstimulated brain. But it is here, it has weight, it can be touched. It all happened, you see. My grandfather and grandmother came to America with some money. They settled in Derby because of the lumber industry, which he knew something about it. He did well, and his children were born into comfortable circumstances. After my grandpa died, Uncle Otto was the only one in charge of the business. Uncle Otto at that moment needed a partner to continue with the business. He found George. Their partnership lasted for 22 years until the year I was born. In fact, and prosperity was all they knew. George bring a truck. I don't know where George came by truck. It was broke down and was repaired and broke down again and was repaired again. When this piece of junk finally gave up, it gave up in a spectacular fashion. It went like the wonderful one-housed shade in the Holmes poem. George and Uncle Otto were coming up the Black Henry Road one day in 1953, and by Uncle Otto's own admission, both of them were sweet house drunk. At the bottom of the hill, there was an explosion that blew the engine compartments, flowing sides out like red dragon's wings. The radiator cap rocked into the summer sky, steam plumed up like an old faithful. Uncle Otto came down on the brake pedal, but he couldn't see where he was driving, and he ran off the road.
The two men got out to examine the damage. Neither of them was a mechanic, but neither was it necessary to realize that the wound was deadly. McCutcheon had taken a look at the field, and he decided this was the place where he would build his retirement home. They walked back to the road together and hooked a ride into a Castle Rock with the Cushman bakery truck, which happened to be passing. He didn't imagine that he would die in that field 2 years later, crushed under the front end of his own truck, which became Uncle Otto's truck. When he died, they were able to get Billy Dodd to put it on the road and put blocks under it so he could look at it. A year later, the Creswell left his blocks and crushed McCutcheon. I grew up in Castle Rock. When I was born, my father took me there. Of what had been my uncle's property, I even got it too, that ugly monster that he had. Others say that one accident was enough, but just the thought of what had happened was enough to give a small boy in a knee pants a shiver. I knew the story of how I had crushed my Uncle Otto's partner. I even heard that poor McCutcheon looked like a pumpkin crushed by a tractor wheel. That haunted me my thoughts for months. But my father, of course, had no idea of that. I also believed that the bad scary feeling which swamped me when my father buzzed me into the cab of the truck came from the truck. It took 22 years for me to decide it wasn't the Creswell that had murdered Georgie McCutcheon. My Uncle Otto had done that. The Creswell was a landmark in my life, but it belonged to the whole area's consciousness as well. If you were giving someone directions on how to get from Bridgeton to Castle Rock, you told them they'd know they were going right if they saw a big old red truck sitting off to the left in a hayfield 3 miles or so after the turn from 11. For a long time, my father called the Creswell the Trinity Hill Memorial to the tourist truck, but then he left it. By then, Uncle Otto's obsession with the truck had become too much to be funny. So much for the provenance, now for the secret. That he killed McCutcheon is the one thing of which I am absolutely sure. How do I know it? He did it, you ask. Simply because he was with the McCutcheon that day, not because of the truck. The Griswold, when his obsession began to overtake him, he went to live across from it, that tiny house, even though in the last few years of his life he was deathly afraid of the truck beach across the road. I think Uncle Otto got McCutcheon out into the field where the Griswold was blocked up by getting McCutcheon to talk about his house plans. McCutcheon was always eager to talk about his house and his approaching retirement. The partners had been made a good offer by a much larger company, and McCutcheon wanted to take it. Uncle Otto didn't. There had been a quiet struggle going on between them over the offer since the spring. I think that disagreement was the reason Uncle Otto decided to get rid of his partner. I think that my uncle might have prepared for the moment by doing two things. First, undermining the blocks holding the truck up, and second, planting something on the ground or perhaps sitting directly in front of the truck where McCutcheon would see it. What sort of thing? I don't know. If not, you can be sure, Uncle Otto points out. What's that? He asks, pointing. Don't know, McCutcheon says, and hurries over to take a look. McCutcheon falls on his knees in front of the Griswold, trying to work the object out of the ground, while my uncle strolls casually around to the back of the truck. One good shove and down it came, brushing McCutcheon flat, squaring him like a pump.
1965. Uncle Otto had a small one-room house built across from the truck, a fine new schoolhouse, he said, and all he asked was to name it after his late partner. As a result of his eccentric offer, Uncle Otto made it all the way from odd to then peculiar in one jump. The selectmen sent him a letter thanking him kindly, but declining the little schoolhouse. A year afterward, he sold the business. I believe he had more there to keep. In his own way, Uncle Otto became as much a fixture as the truck across the road. He had gotten very fat. Folks often saw him standing in the doorway of his peculiar little house, just standing there, looking out at the road and across it, looking at the truck, his truck. When Uncle Otto stopped coming to town, it was my father who made sure that he didn't starve to death. Dad died 2 years before Uncle Otto. In 1975, when he told me for the first time that the truck was creeping toward the house, he sat at his table, smoking, watching me put the canned goods away and listening to me chatter. I thought he might have forgotten who I was. Sometimes he did that or pretended to, and once he had turned my blood cold by calling, "That you, George?" out the window as I walked up to the house. On that particular day in July of 1975, he broke into whatever trivial conversation I was making to ask, with harsh abruptness, "What do you make of yonder truck?" That abruptness startled an honest answer out of me. I wet my pants in the cab of that truck when I was 5, I said. Uncle Otto laughed long and loud. I turned and gazed at him with wonder. I could not remember ever hearing him laugh before. Then he looked at me, his eyes glittering. Getting closer, he said. What, Uncle Otto? I asked. I thought he had made one of his puzzling leaps from one subject to another. Maybe he meant Christmas was getting closer, or the millennium, or the return of Christ the King. That boggardly truck, he said, looking at me in a still, narrow, confidential way that I didn't much like, getting close every year. It is, I asked, consciously, thinking that here was a new and particularly unpleasant idea. I glanced out at the crosswalk, standing across the road with hay all around it and the white mountains behind it, and for one crazy minute actually did seem closer. Then I blinked and the illusion went away. The truck was right there. It had always been, of course. Oh, he said, gets a little closer every year. Maybe you need glasses. I can't see any difference at all, Uncle Otto. Of course you can't, he snapped. Can see the hour and move on your wristwatch. Either can you. Vulgarly, things move too slow to see, unless you watch it all the time. Just the way I watched that truck. He winked at me, and I shivered. Why would it move? I asked. It wants me. That's what he said. Got me in mind all the while. That truck does. One day it will bust right in there, and that will be the end. I will run me down just like I did, Mac, and that will be the end. This scared me quite badly. His reasonable tone was what scared me the most, I think, and the way the young commonly respond to fright is to crack wise or become flippant. Ought to move back to your house in town if it is bothered you, Uncle Todd, I said, and you never would have known from my tone that my back was rich with gooseflesh. He looked at me, and then at the truck across the road. Kent, he said, sometimes a man just had to stay in one place and waited to come to him. Wait for what, Uncle Otto? I asked, although I thought he must mean the truck. Fate, he said, and winked again. He looked frightened.
A kidney disease killed my father. Him and I had a lot of talk on Uncle Otto. Dad, kind of knowing what had happened in 1955. Mine was, even though my dad never knew how serious was Uncle Otto's obsession. With that truck, I did. My uncle stood all day long looking at the truck like if it was a hand watch. Uncle Otto lost completely his mind, even though with many millions in his bank account. By 1981, he started to urinate in the streets and to walk nakedly. So people become very upset and suggested to put him away for his own good, for it was not proper of a touristic zone. I still bring groceries to Uncle's house, and I also told him to stop doing that in the road. I never got through him, he didn't concern, because His activities had become a mania Cruisewell Ride Road. It was his as a matter of fact. I woke up last night around 3, and there he was, right outside the window. Quentin, he said, I seen it there, moonlight shining off the windshield, not 6 feet from where I was laying, and my heart almost stopped. It almost stopped, Quentin. I showed him the truck hadn't moved. It was right there where Macushon had planned to build. It didn't good. That's just what you see, boy, he said with a wild and infinite contempt, a cigarette shaking in one hand, his eyeballs rolling. That's just what you see. It was as if he hadn't heard. Bugger almost got me, he whispered. I felt a chill. He didn't look crazy. Miserable, yes, and terrified certainly, but not crazy. For a moment, I remember my father bustling me into a cab of that truck. I remember smelling oil and leather and blood. It almost got me, he repeated. And 3 weeks later, it did. And Wednesday, a muggy evening, I felt nervous, for I knew something had happened when I went to Uncle's Otto place. I had an illusion which upon the throw was in the dooryard, red painted and with his rotten steak sides, but I blind and the illusion was gone. But I knew that my uncles had died. I hurried up to my uncle's, and the door was open. He was lying in his bed, wearing green pants and a thermal underwear, shirt with his eyes opened. Uncle Otto, I spoke quietly, not expecting an answer. You don't lie on your bed with your eyes open and bugging out like that just for the hell. If I felt anything, it was a relief. It was over. Uncle Otto, I approaching. Uncle. I stopped seeing for the first time how strange this happened. His lower face looked. How swell and twisted seemed for the first time. How his eyes weren't just staring, but actually glaring from their sockets. But they weren't looking toward the doorway or at the ceiling. They were twisted toward the little window above his bed. The next night, it happened something that it wasn't supposed to happen. I went into my uncle's old house, and he looked at me and he whispered, Nephew, forgive me, I love you. And I say, what? You love me? You have never pronounced that to me before. I love you and I want to confess this to you. I love so much your father and all my family. But I've been so devil in spirit and I've been so selfish. That's why I'm here. And I think that truck killed me. Forgive me. Those were his last words. Before the Otto's death, he confessed to me that he loved our family so much, but that a devil spirit had blinded him, so he regretted for acting shamefully in life. I couldn't believe that truck killed my other uncles. That's why I will never forget that day.